First of all, let me thank EastWest Institute and the CPG for the kind invitation. It's late evening here, so hopefully I will make some sense. I am fascinated by Bruce's elaboration on what is going to come forward. I think this optimism is what we need. However, my own narrative will be mostly about what has happened as a result of COVID-19, and I'll confine myself exclusively to South Asia. I have spoken a lot on the global dimensions and other platforms recently. There is a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction with the global governance regime, and the fractures in multilateralism are quite self-evident with what has been happening to WHO, WTO, which are really institutional mechanisms that could have lifted us during pandemic. By and large, some good things have happened in terms of the pandemic response globally, but from some of us who have been affiliated for 40 years with the development business, we would have liked to see much more happening post-pandemic in terms of the responses at the international level. So with this broad comment, let me talk about South Asia. Today I was checking it out. South Asia has reached over 3 million cases, which is almost 15% of global cases. Hardest hit is India, and I know we have an Indian panelist, so he can talk more about it, but this is almost 3/4 of the South Asia coronavirus cases. So in absence of cure, the ground realities of the South Asian inadequate health facilities, absence of health insurance, social safety nets, are things which are very troublesome. And if you recognize that the testing has been under-tested across South Asia by and large. So infection rate in South Asia is third highest with US and Brazil at the top. We do know the biggest challenge South Asia has its demographic dynamics, both in terms of the rapid population growth and also the young population. How do you harness the young population in the right way? We have been saying, well, they are our assets, but we have yet to harness them through quality education skills and so and so. What is scary is that this population is going to rise to 2.1 billion by 2030, which is when the SDG agenda deadline is, and we haven't really progressed a lot in SDG agenda before the pandemic, but it's what's happened is that pandemic has distracted attention from the implementation of the sustainable development, which is what South Asia needs desperately. So what happened, I just heard Bruce talk about the IMF. South Asia's regional GDP, as per the World Bank, contracted by 2.7% in 2020. There are lots of technicalities to this number, but it's important to recognize that this is about 8.8% below the pre-pandemic growth. It is indeed the worst performance in 4 decades, but they have been shining years for all these countries at different data time periods. I can recall India pre-2008 hitting 9% of growth rate, and similar performance from some other South Asian economies. With the easing now of lockdowns and drop in infection rate for now, recognizing the scale and uncertainty is beyond us at this point because we don't have a crystal ball. Growth could recover, but when and how fast, I'll get into it. The positive news, as I said, is easing of lockdowns. Crop sowing has gained momentum, although the damages of locust attack and monsoon rains is worrisome. But regional GDP, by and large, all the forecasters are talking about that it will bounce back to a positive range because it's a dynamic region. But the uncertainties and downside risk remain high, particularly of the future trajectory of the virus, but also about the macroeconomic conditions of these economies having been scarred so badly now. Political fragilities are worrisome, and despite United Nations Secretary General's call at the Security Council to abandon all these cross-border rifts and to hold on freeze some of the disputes, the geopolitical tensions within our region have elevated in midst of this crisis, with phenomenal concerns regarding violation of human rights in certain pockets. South Asia's macroeconomic and structural vulnerabilities, they have persisted for a long time, but are of different order and magnitudes at the country level. Pre-COVID, in 2019, except for Bhutan, all South Asian economies reported fiscal deficit, with India and Pakistan rising to over 7% of GDP in 2019. And external current account deficits were in double digits in Bhutan, Nepal, and Maldives. So how are we going to move forward? Pakistan, of course, has corrected somewhat its current account imbalances, but despite IMF programs, its reserves have come under pressure and medium-term outlook on balance of payment is worrisome. India has sufficient reserves, they're pretty impressive. Post-COVID-19, balance of payment positions came under renewed pressures as countries register a fall in foreign outflows, exports, remittances, which account for 30% of GDP in Nepal, and tourism receipts really were hurting a lot of economies. Economic disruption hit the small and medium enterprises, which otherwise accounts for 30% of GDP, exports, and is the engine of job generation. Given 60 to 80% informality in South Asia, livelihood of large segment of workers was impacted. There are now firm signs that South Asia will witness a reversal in good progress in poverty reduction. Very unfortunate. Latest World Bank Global Economic Prospects report suggests that COVID-19 induced poverty will add 42 million more people below 1.9 poverty line and 138 million below $3.2 poverty line, which is almost 2/3 of the global poverty. This is the outcome of June 2020 downward scenario. So it is somewhat pessimistic, but you know what ballparks are we talking about here? South Asia's fiscal space is very worrisome to me because of the large stimulus, but this has been limited from what is absolutely needed. There have been some recent model simulations with UNSCAP has done, and it talks about need for much larger to salvage people and the economy. India and Pakistan's fiscal deficits are expected to double over the budgeted targets. Total package of COVID ranges from anywhere from 2% to 10% of GDP in these countries. But what accounts as fiscal stimulus is public spending for relief, either through cash transfers, modest health spending, social programs, and tax reliefs to industries. Bulk of the mitigation burden has been shifted to central banks. Monetary stimulus has involved a combination of adjustment in policy rates, with steepest adjustment executed by my own country's central bank, the repos and reverse repos liquidity operations, generous sectoral refinancing facilities at concessional rates have been offered, and notable is emphasis on reviving construction and housing activities. And there have been few decent food security measures to ensure there is at least rural livelihood. Central banks have claimed that policy transmission is working, though in some jurisdiction, update of schemes and refinancing is low, reinforcing the point that enabling sector policy environment is the most critical thing to get to where Bruce has been talking about in context of South Asia. So the take up of the refinancing facilities of central banks has had mixed record. Good news is that the financial stability reports have allayed concerns regarding financial instability. However, vulnerabilities could grow as the non-performing portfolios of the banking system have to the level that could cause tremendous alarm at this point. So to generate fiscal space, South Asian economies, except India, turn to seeking IMF support. And this is where the global governance mattered. So total $2.6 billion financing. And of course, a lot of MDB development policy has come through for our region. At the same time, few regional economies availed of the G20 debt service suspension initiative, which is to the tune of 3.3 billion. It is notable that Pakistan borrowed over half of the regional emergency financing of the fund, and in the sub-region, I mean, and over 80% of the debt services suspension initiative offered to the region. This is, of course, over and above the significant development policy lending benefiting the region. So you can imagine the shock this crisis has caused to the Pakistan economy, which was in midst of a twin deficit crisis already and was trying to recover. In shaping recovery, South Asia, of course, has to exploit its real potential, as almost all countries are operating today below potential and at low capital and labor productivity. And I'm going to take this part very fast because I know that there will be questions relating to some of it. But let me say that since you asked the question of outlook, I think the outlook would depend on how countries re-strategize themselves and launch immediately structural reforms. There are very limited signs of that happening. And they should build back better by first implementing sustainable development goals on a fast track to promote balance and inclusive growth. Now, of course, there's a trade-off. Should you keep your people alive by feeding them and giving them cash transfers or launching medium-term programs? Second, as Bruce has pointed out, to develop digital corridors and promote e-commerce. And a lot of that work is underway in Pakistan. But we are very fortunate that China as a whole is doing a lot at the global level. I am actually the Belt and Road Initiative's global advisors, one of the 12, and I know that they are doing a lot of work in this area. Also, we need to support decarbonization if we are going to build back better through green and blue recovery. Again, China is talking about Green Belt and Road Initiative. And we have to expand and institutionalize social protection system, because today we have nothing out there which is sustainable social protection system, and financing of it is challenged. My last point is that this is the least integrated region, as everybody knows. And regional cooperation always starts with promoting peace. I can tell you, I have worked on ASEAN Economic Cooperation Platform for almost 20 years. I have worked on looking at EU model. I have looked at all the regional cooperation initiatives that exist in Asia, because United Nations, ESCAP, which is a body that I have left 2 years back, has been a primary institution that has been promoting regional economic cooperation in all the sub-regions of Asia Pacific, but more so in South Asia, where we have been more frustrated than any other sub-region. It is, however, peace is a prerequisite for optimal resource allocation and sharing. be it water, energy security, transport connectivity, or for that matter, looking at IT, because we have been working on Asia Pacific Information Superhighway, and transport connectivity. UNSCAP has developed the Asia highway corridors, Asian railway corridors, and I could write a book of the frustration that's happened because we have not progressed very fast. We've been working on SARC power grid development in terms of analytical work. The direct full benefits of full power grid itself, interconnection could reach 9 billion each year in direct savings and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by more than 9% per annum. Renewable energy, a lot of work being done. India has taken a lead in solar within South Asia region, but we have to collectively work on arresting the drift in the climate change, which is going to be very scary post-pandemic. The forecasters and the scientists are predicting that, well, pandemic could be treated with a virus, but the after effects and what will happen in terms of the turbulence the world will face as a result of the climate disasters cannot be arrested with any pill, because it's not an epidemic, it's a real, and you know, this region is known for the heavy load of the natural disasters and the largest economic cost and loss of lives, and we have written books on it at the UNSCAP, assessing the magnitude of it. So let me conclude by saying it's easy to say regional cooperation in South Asia, but it is very difficult to implement because of the two large powers. In European Union, it was France and Germany. In South Asia, it is Pakistan and India, which are blocking the road rather than being constructive, like the other players in the European Union. Until today, if you know who led the bond issuance of the EU with the sovereign backing, it was really these two large players. So we need maturity of the large players. Instead of that, everybody is looking at alliances with other rather than with Asia, South Asia. But that's fine. So in that context, the relevance of the result has to be re-examined. And perhaps, okay, let's be real. There will be India looking at South and Southwest, and Pakistan looking at the Karakum region, and of course, with the support of Belt and Road Initiative to the global corridors, European markets, because Belt and Road is not about just Pakistan. Belt and Road Initiative is an alliance between Asia and Europe of a very high order. And I say that again because I have been interfacing with European Union on the Belt and Road Initiative, which is amazing the amount of work that has been done. What is needed is to build, rather than be aspiring totally on global value chain, if we only had a very focused mission of regional value chain fostering, we would probably be able to understand what we need to fix in terms of the trade regime or transport connectivity and so on and so forth. I'll stop here because I suspect I've gone over time. Farwa, thank you for allowing me the luxury to talk. Thank you.